He looked the poor girl in the eyes and made a ruthless offer. "If you can tame my wild horse, the entire farm is yours." The crowd laughed, mocked, and bet against her. But when the horse bowed to her calm, the world stood still. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise that this will be the best story you will hear in your life. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Miller's Creek as Ellie Sullivan, a slender girl with determined eyes, emerged from beneath the old railway bridge that had been her family's makeshift home for the past 18 months. At 19, she carried the weight of responsibility far beyond her years. The small encampment of tarps, cardboard, and discarded furniture had become a sanctuary of sorts, not the life they'd planned, but one they'd learned to navigate since her father's workplace accident left him unable to work, and medical bills consumed their savings. Ellie's routine was methodical. She'd wake before dawn, wash her face in the creek, braid her chestnut hair and prepare for another day of selling homemade candies throughout Meadowbrook, a once thriving agricultural town now struggling to maintain its identity against the encroaching urban sprawl. Her loyal companion, a scraggly mutt named Duke, padded alongside her, his ribs visible, but his spirit unbroken. "Today's going to be different, Duke," she whispered, adjusting the weathered wooden box of carefully wrapped caramels and peppermint sticks. "I can feel it." Duke tilted his head, his mismatched eyes, one blue, one brown, seeming to understand the weight of her words. They had sold exactly $7 worth of candy yesterday, enough for a small bag of rice and some vegetables, but not enough for the antibiotics her younger sister needed. As Ellie walked through town, she was largely invisible to those around her. The locals had grown accustomed to the quiet girl with the candy box. Some offered sympathetic smiles, others averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the reminder of how quickly fortune could turn. She had learned to be grateful for the few who stopped, who dropped coins into her hand without requiring her to explain her circumstances. It was near the old feed store that she first noticed the commotion. Our crowd had gathered around the bulletin board, voices rising in disbelief and excitement. "Jackson's finally lost it," an older man in overalls declared. "That ranch has been in his family for 4 generations." "Desperate times," another replied. "After what happened with that stallion at the county fair, his reputation's shot to hell." Ellie edged closer, Duke pressing against her leg as they navigated through the small crowd. The notice, printed on heavy cream-colored paper, announced, in bold letters, "Open challenge to any who can tame the untamable. If you can ride Winchester's ghost for a full 3 minutes before the upcoming Harvest Festival, Willow Creek Ranch will be yours. Contact Harrison Jackson for details and to accept the challenge." Photographs were pinned alongside the notice, a sprawling ranch with white fences and a red barn, and beside it, a powerful white stallion, muscles, rippling beneath a coat that seemed to glow in the sunlight. But what caught Ellie's attention was the look in the horse's eyes. Not wildness, but something deeper, something she recognized. "What happened with the horse?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. A woman turned, eyebrows raised in surprise. That the girl with the candy box had spoken at all. "That horse has thrown and injured every trainer who's tried to break him. Nearly killed Jackson himself at the county fair last month, bucked him right into the judge's stand in front of everyone. Jackson was once the best horse trainer in 3 states, but now no one will hire him. His debts are piling up, and that horse has become his curse." Ellie nodded, processing this information as she studied the notice again. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "They say the horse was caught wild in the mountains. Some folks claim it's got devil in its blood. But if you ask me, it's just never met someone it respects." Those words lingered in Ellie's mind as she continued her rounds through town, selling fewer candies than usual, as everyone seemed preoccupied with the news of Jackson's challenge. By mid-afternoon, her feet aching and her spirits low, she found herself at the edge of town, staring down the long dirt road that led to Willow Creek Ranch. "What do you think, Duke? Should we have a look?" she asked, already knowing the answer. The ranch was larger than she'd expected, though signs of neglect were evident: peeling paint on the fence posts, an overgrown pasture, a broken window in the barn patched with plywood. A pickup truck with faded lettering sat in the drive, its bed filled with hay bales. As Ellie approached the main house, the screen door opened and a man stepped onto the porch. Harrison Jackson was in his early 60s, with weathered skin and silver hair that had once been as black as coal. His right arm was in a sling, and he leaned heavily on a wooden cane. His eyes narrowed as he watched her approach. "If you're selling something, I'm not buying," he called out. "I'm here about the challenge," Ellie replied, her voice steady, despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Jackson's laugh was harsh, cutting through the quiet afternoon air. "You? Girl, that horse has thrown men twice your size with years of experience. Go back to whatever you were doing before." "I'd like to see him at least." Something in her tone, perhaps the quiet determination, made Jackson pause. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her worn clothes, the candy box, the loyal dog at her side. "Your funeral," he finally muttered, gesturing toward the corral behind the barn. "He's back there." Ellie followed, Duke trotting alongside her. The corral was larger than standard, with reinforced fencing and a heavy gate secured with multiple chains. Inside, the white stallion paced restlessly, his movements fluid and powerful. Up close, she could see the scars on his flanks and the wariness in his eyes. "Winchester's ghost," Jackson said, a mixture of pride and bitterness in his voice. "Most magnificent animal I've ever seen, and the most stubborn. I've tried everything, gentling, pressure, reward training. Nothing works. He lets no one near him, let alone on his back." "What's his story?" Ellie asked, keeping her voice low as she watched the horse. "Found him in the high country 3 years ago, injured and half-starved. Nursed him back to health, thought I'd train him like any other. But there's something different about this one." Jackson tapped his temple. "It's like he's thinking 3 steps ahead. Every time I think I've figured him out, he changes the game." The more stallion had stopped pacing and was watching them, ears forward, nostrils flaring slightly. "Why offer the ranch?" Ellie asked, not taking her eyes off the horse. "Why not just sell him?" Jackson's laugh was hollow. "Who'd buy him? Besides, it's not just about the money anymore. My reputation's ruined. If someone can succeed where I failed." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Look, this isn't some fairy tale. That horse is dangerous. The challenge is real, but so is the risk." "I understand," Ellie said quietly, "but I'd like to try." "Why? What's a girl like you going to do with a rundown ranch?" Ellie finally turned to face him. "I have my reasons, same as you have yours." Something shifted in Jackson's expression, a glimmer of respect perhaps, or simple curiosity. He studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "The legal papers are drawn up. You get 3 weeks until the harvest festival. If you can, ride him for 3 minutes in front of the town. The place is yours. If not," he gestured vaguely, "life goes on as before." "I'll need to be able to work with him before then," Ellie said. "You can come by any time. I'll be here." He hesitated, then added, "What's your name, girl?" "Ellie. Ellie Sullivan." "Well, Ellie Sullivan, you've just made the craziest decision of your young life." He extended his good hand. "Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch." As they shook hands, the white stallion snorted and pawed at the ground, as if sensing the agreement that had just been made. Ellie looked toward him, meeting his gaze steadily. "Hello, Ghost," she said softly. "I think we have a lot to learn about each other." Behind her, Jackson shook his head, already regretting his impulsive challenge, but something about the girl's quiet confidence made him wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, she might see something in that horse that he had missed. Bampwede. Of Ellie's acceptance of Jackson's challenge spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire. By the following morning, curious onlookers began appearing at the ranch fence, hoping to catch a glimpse of the foolhardy girl who thought she could tame Winchester's ghost. Some came to scoff, others out of genuine concern, but all were united by the irresistible draw of potential spectacle. For Ellie, the attention was an unwelcome distraction. She arrived at dawn before the spectators, with Duke faithfully at her side, and a small backpack containing a worn notebook, a thermos of tea, and half a peanut butter sandwich. Lunch would have to wait until she sold more candies in the afternoon. Morning. Jackson greeted her gruffly from the porch, coffee mug in hand. Your audience should be arriving soon. I'm not here to perform, Ellie replied, heading straight for the corral. Is there somewhere more private I can work with him? Jackson studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a fenced paddock behind the barn, obscured from the main road by a grove of old oak trees. No one will bother you there, but I warn you, Ghost is even more unpredictable in enclosed spaces. Thank you, she said simply, and made her way to the corral where the white stallion stood watching, head high and muscles tense. Moving the horse proved challenging. Jackson suggested using a lead rope, but Ghost flattened his ears and bared his teeth at the mere sight of it. Eventually, they opened the connecting gates and created a pathway to the paddock, which Ghost chose to follow only after everyone had backed well away. Once in the paddock, Ellie did something unexpected. She sat down on the ground, opened her notebook, and began to write. Duke settled beside her, his head on his paws, alert but relaxed. Ghost maintained his distance, occasionally pawing at the ground or tossing his magnificent head, but his eyes rarely left the strange girl who made no move toward him. What exactly is your strategy here? Jackson asked from outside the fence, genuine curiosity in his voice. I'm getting to know him, Ellie replied without looking up, by sitting there, by being here, by letting him get used to me. Jackson shook his head. We don't have 3 years, girl, we have 3 weeks. Then I'll use every minute wisely. There was a quiet determination in her voice that discouraged further argument. This became her routine, mornings with Ghost, afternoons selling candies in town. She rarely approached the horse directly, instead creating a quiet presence in his space. Sometimes she read aloud from her notebook, her voice soft and rhythmic. Other times she simply sat in silence, observing his movements, his reactions, the subtle shifts in his demeanor. By the end of the first week, Ghost had begun grazing while she was present, a sign of growing comfort that Jackson noted with reluctant admiration. But they were still worlds away from riding, a fact that the increasingly vocal skeptics in town were quick to point out. Chief among them was Wesley Grant, owner of the neighboring Blue Pine Ranch and longtime rival of Harrison Jackson. Grant had coveted Willow Creek's water rights for years, and Jackson's financial troubles had seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally acquire them, until the challenge had been issued. Grant arrived at the ranch on the 8th day, driving his ostentatious black truck with custom rims that seemed out of place in the dusty farmland. Ellie was sitting near the fence of the paddock, sketching Ghost's profile in her notebook, when Grant approached Jackson on the porch. This charade has gone on long enough, Harrison, Grant's voice carried across the yard. That girl hasn't got a chance in hell, and you know it. Let me make you a fair offer for the place before you embarrass yourself further. The terms of the challenge are clear, Jackson replied stiffly. If she can ride Ghost at the festival, Willow Creek is hers. If not, I'll consider other options. Options? Grant scoffed. You'll be lucky if the bank doesn't foreclose before then. At least my offer would clear your debts. And leave me with nothing to show for 4 generations of Jacksons who built this place. Grant's gaze shifted to Ellie, who had continued her sketching despite the tension unfolding nearby. And you think handing it over to some vagrant girl is better? What does she know about running a ranch, about respecting its legacy? Something in his tone, the dismissive cruelty, made Duke raise his head and growl softly. Ellie placed a calming hand on the dog's neck, but her own expression had hardened. Miss Sullivan has shown more respect for this land in a week than you have in 20 years, Wesley, Jackson said, his voice quiet but firm. And now, unless you're here to wish her luck, I suggest you leave. Grant's face flushed with anger. This isn't over, Harrison. He stalked back to his truck, but paused as he passed the paddock. You're wasting your time, girl. That horse can't be tamed, and even if by some miracle you could ride him, you'd never belong here. Ellie met his gaze calmly. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Grant. Her measured response seemed to infuriate him more than any retort could have. With a final glare, he climbed into his truck and drove away in a cloud of dust. Don't mind, Wesley. Jackson said, approaching the paddock fence after Grant had gone. "He's been trying to piece together my land with his for years. Thinks he's building some kind of empire." "It's not just about the land for him," Ellie observed quietly. "It's about winning." Jackson nodded slowly. "You're more perceptive than most folks around here give you credit for." He paused, studying her with newfound interest. "Why did you take this challenge, Ellie? Really?" She was silent for a long moment, her eyes on Ghost, who had moved closer to the fence than he'd ever ventured before. "My family lost everything when my father was injured at the mill," she finally said. "The company fought his compensation claim. The insurance denied coverage and the medical bills kept coming. We had a small house on Oak Street, nothing fancy, but it was ours, until it wasn't." She closed her notebook gently. "People look at us differently now, like we've become invisible, or worse, like we're something to be afraid of. And the ranch would change that. It would give us a chance," she said simply, "a place to belong again. Somewhere my sister can recover, where my parents can rebuild their dignity." She looked up at Jackson. "But that's not why I'm here with Ghost. I'm here because when I looked at that notice, I didn't see a way out. I saw him. And I understood. Something about him that maybe others don't." "What's that?" "He's not wild because he wants to hurt anyone. He's wild because he's never had a reason to trust." Jackson was silent for a long moment. "You might be right about the horse," he finally said. "But Wesley's right about one thing. Knowing how to connect with a horse doesn't mean you know how to run a ranch." "I'm a quick learner," Ellie replied, "and I respect what this place means to you." The sincerity in her voice seemed to reach something in the old rancher. With a thoughtful nod, he turned toward the barn. "Come on then. If you're serious about this, there are some things you should know." Inside the barn, Jackson showed her the ranch ledgers, explaining the seasonal cycles, the irrigation systems, the delicate balance of costs and income that kept a place like Willow Creek functioning. To his surprise, Ellie asked insightful questions, taking notes and drawing connections between different aspects of ranch management. "My father worked as a bookkeeper before his accident," she explained when Jackson commented on her quick grasp of the financial details. "He taught me about balancing accounts when I was 12. As the days passed, a routine developed. Mornings with Ghost, learning the subtle language of his movements, the flick of an ear or the shift of weight that telegraphed his intentions. Afternoons split between selling candies in town and learning about the ranch from Jackson, whose initial skepticism had evolved into grudging respect. Progress with Ghost was slow but steady. By the end of the second week, he would graze within a few feet of where Ellie sat, occasionally stretching his neck to sniff curiously at her hair or clothing. Duke had proved an unexpected ally, his calm presence seeming to reassure the stallion that Ellie could be trusted. "He's testing you," Jackson observed one morning, as Ghost repeatedly approached and retreated. "Seeing if you'll try to grab him or force your will on him like others have." "I won't," Ellie said firmly. "That's not how this works." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A sudden thunderstorm rolled in one afternoon, sending most of the town's residents hurrying for shelter. Ellie, who had been in the barn reviewing irrigation maps with Jackson, rushed to the paddock, where Ghost was galloping in agitated circles, his white coat gleaming against the darkening sky. "We should get him into the barn," Jackson shouted, over a crash of thunder. "He hates storms, they make him panic." But as they approached the paddock gate, Ghost reared and charged toward the fence, causing Jackson to stumble backward. Ellie remained still, rain soaking through her clothes, as she watched the terrified horse. "Ellie, get back!" Jackson called. "He's dangerous like this." Instead, she opened the gate and stepped inside, ignoring Jackson's protests. Duke followed, pressing close to her leg as they walked steadily toward the center of the paddock. Lightning split the sky as Ellie stood in the center of the paddock, rain plastering her clothes to her slender frame. Ghost circled her at a distance, his movements increasingly frantic with each thunderclap. Jackson watched from the gate, his knuckles white on the fence post, unable to intervene, yet unwilling to leave. "It's okay," Ellie called softly, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I know it's frightening. I'm scared too." Ghost snorted, pawing at the muddy ground. His eyes rolled, showing whites, but he kept returning his gaze to the motionless figure in the center of his domain. Duke remained pressed against Ellie's leg, unusually still, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Slowly, deliberately, Ellie sank to her knees in the mud. She extended her empty hands, palms up, and began to speak in a low, steady stream of words that carried to the horse despite the rain. "I know what it's like when the world feels too big, too dangerous," she said. "When you don't know who to trust or where you belong. My family and we lived in a house once. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Then my dad got hurt at work. His back, 4 crushed. A vertebrae, the medical bills came, and then the foreclosure notice." Ghost had slowed his circling, his ears flicking toward her voice. "The night we had to leave, it rained like this. We had nowhere to go. The bridge became our shelter. Just tarps and cardboard at first. People looked right through us after that. It's strange how quickly you can become invisible." A particularly violent crack of thunder made Ghost rear up, but instead of bolting, he came down closer to Ellie than before, his breathing ragged. "You're not invisible to me," she continued. "I see you. I see your strength, your fear, your pride. You don't have to let me ride you. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but I'm asking you to trust me just a little. The way Duke trusts me, the way I'm trusting you right now." The stallion took a hesitant step forward, then another. Duke remained perfectly still as Ghost lowered his head, nostrils flaring as he breathed in their scents. Ellie didn't move, didn't try to touch him, simply continued her quiet monologue as the rain began to ease. "My sister Rose, she's 15. She got sick last winter. Pneumonia. The doctors at the free clinic did what they could, but she needs better care than we can afford. This challenge, this ranch, it could change everything for us, but not if it means breaking your spirit." Ghost was close enough now that Ellie could feel his breath on her face. Slowly, with infinite patience, she raised one hand, not to grab or control, but as an offering. The stallion hesitated, then pressed his muzzle against her palm. From the fence, Jackson's breath caught. In 3 years of trying, he'd never achieved this simple connection. He watched in amazement as Ellie slowly rose to her feet, her hand still gentle against Ghost's face, and the horse allowed it, more than allowed it, seemed to lean into her touch. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. The storm passed, but something fundamental had changed. Over the next few days, Ghost began to accept Ellie's presence not just as an observer, but as a companion. He would follow her around the paddock, nuzzle her shoulder, allow her to brush his coat. Still, the prospect of riding him remained distant, and the harvest festival was just days away. "You've made remarkable progress," Jackson acknowledged, as they shared coffee on the porch one morning. "But connecting with him isn't the same as riding him. Have you thought about what happens if you can't meet the challenge?" Ellie nodded, her eyes on the distant paddock where Ghost grazed peacefully. "My family keeps going as we have been, and you'll likely sell to Mr. Grant." "I don't want to," Jackson admitted, "but my options are running out. The bank's been patient because of my family's history with them, but they can't extend my loans forever." "I understand," Ellie said quietly. "Whatever happens, thank you for this opportunity. It's meant more than you know." Jackson studied her thoughtfully. "You've changed too, you know, not just Ghost." "How so?" "You stand taller, speak more, look people in the eye." Ellie smiled faintly. "Funny how being seen can do that to a person." The day before the festival, Wesley Grant made another appearance at Willow Creek. This time he brought the local banker, Edward Pearson, and Meadowbrook's mayor, Thomas Wilson. They arrived in Grant's black truck, an imposing trio in business attire that seemed out of place among the weathered buildings of the ranch. "Harrison," Mayor Wilson greeted as they approached the porch where Jackson sat with Ellie, reviewing the festival schedule. "We thought we should discuss some concerns about tomorrow's event." "What concerns?" Jackson asked warily. Banker Pearson cleared his throat. "There's the matter of liability. If this young woman is injured, attempting to ride that dangerous animal, the town could be held responsible. The challenge takes place on private property," Jackson pointed out, "and Miss Sullivan has signed a waiver." "Nevertheless," the mayor continued, "there's also the question of appropriateness. This type of spectacle, with the potential for serious injury, doesn't reflect the image Meadowbrook is trying to project to potential investors. Potential investors like Mr. Grant, I assume? Ellie asked quietly. Grant stepped forward, his expensive boots gleaming in the afternoon sun. I've simply expressed my concern to the town council. My development plans would bring jobs and revenue to Meadowbrook. Those plans work best if they include Willow Creek's water access. So you've arranged to have the challenge cancelled, Jackson said flatly. Mayor Wilson shifted uncomfortably. Not cancelled exactly, just postponed indefinitely, pending a proper safety review. Which could take months, Jackson translated, his voice hardening. By which time the bank will have foreclosed, and Wesley here can buy Willow Creek at auction for pennies on the dollar. Banker Pearson had the grace to look embarrassed. Your next payment is due at the end of the month, Harrison. Without some kind of arrangement? The challenge stands, Jackson interrupted firmly. The notice was public, the terms clear. If you try to interfere, I'll make sure everyone in 3 counties knows exactly why. The mayor looked to Grant, who seemed to be calculating his next move. Finally, Grant smiled thinly. Very well, let the challenge proceed. But when this girl fails, and she will fail, I expect my offer to be given serious consideration. If I fail, Ellie corrected him quietly, then Mr. Jackson will make his own decisions about the ranch's future. Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll see, won't we? Until tomorrow, then. He tipped his hat mockingly and led his companions back to the truck. After they'd gone, Jackson sighed heavily. Wesley's got half the town council in his pocket. If you don't succeed tomorrow, I may not have much choice about selling to him. Then I'd better succeed, Ellie replied simply. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and cool with a crispness in the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Meadowbrook's main street had been transformed overnight. Stalls lined both sides, offering everything from apple cider to handcrafted quilts. Children darted between booths, their laughter mingling with the strains of fiddle music from a small bandstand near the town square. At the center of it all, a temporary corral had been erected, larger than standard, with reinforced fencing and elevated seating on 3 sides. A banner stretched across the entrance, Winchester's Ghost, the Untamable Challenge. By mid-morning, the seats were filling with spectators. Some came out of genuine interest, others for the spectacle, but all were curious to see if the girl, from beneath the bridge, could accomplish what no one else had managed. Ellie arrived at the festival grounds with her family, her father Michael, leaning heavily on a cane, her mother Catherine, whose once pretty face showed the strain of their circumstances, and her younger sister Rose, thin and pale but with excited eyes. Duke padded faithfully alongside them, earning curious glances from the festival-goers. Jackson met them at the edge of the corral, his expression tense. Ghost is in the holding pen behind the corral. He's agitated. All these people, the noise, it's exactly the kind of situation that sets him off. Ellie nodded, scanning the crowd. She spotted Wesley Grant near the judge's stand, surrounded by a group of well-dressed associates. He caught her eye and raised his glass in a mocking toast. I need to see Ghost, she said quietly. Before we begin. Jackson led her to the holding pen where the white stallion was indeed showing signs of distress, pacing nervously, tossing his head, his muscles quivering beneath his gleaming coat. Remember what we discussed, Jackson cautioned. If it gets too dangerous, you signal and we'll call it off. No ranch is worth your life. It's not about the ranch anymore, Ellie replied, her eyes on Ghost. It's about keeping a promise. She entered the pen alone, moving slowly, her posture relaxed despite the tension coursing through her. Ghost's ears flicked toward her, recognition momentarily overriding his fear. It's just us, she murmured, approaching with measured steps. Just like in the paddock, all those people out there, they don't matter. They can't see what we see, know what we know. Gradually, Ghost's pacing slowed. He allowed Ellie to approach, to place a hand on his neck, to lean her forehead against his strong shoulder. They remained that way for several minutes, girl and horse still amidst the growing clamor of the festival. When Mayor Wilson's voice boomed through a megaphone, announcing the commencement of the challenge, Ellie felt Ghost tense beneath her. Hand. Together, she whispered. Whatever happens, we do it together. The gate to the main corral swung open. Ellie led Ghost forward, not with a rope or halter, but walking beside him, one hand lightly touching his shoulder. A hush fell over the crowd as they emerged into the sunlight. Wesley Grant's voice carried from the judge's stand. "She has to ride him, Harrison. That was the challenge. Leading him around like a pet pony doesn't count." "Give her time," Jackson replied, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. For nearly 10 minutes, Ellie walked with Ghost around the perimeter of the corral, speaking softly to him, allowing him to become accustomed to the space, the sounds, the many watching eyes. Finally, she led him to the center, and with one fluid motion placed her hands on his back and swung herself onto him. Ghost froze. Every muscle in his powerful body tensed. The crowd held its collective breath. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, he bucked. Once, twice, a third time, each more powerful than the last. Ellie clung to his mane, her body moving with his, not fighting his movements but flowing with them. On the fourth buck, she lost her grip and was thrown clear across. So the corral landing hard in the dirt. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as Ellie hit the ground. Jackson moved toward the gate, his face ashen, but froze when Ellie quickly rolled to her feet. She was dusty but appeared unharmed, her eyes never leaving Ghost, who had retreated to the far side of the corral. "Time starts when she stays on," Grant called out, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "That doesn't count." Ellie ignored him, focusing entirely on Ghost. The stallion was agitated, pawing at the ground, his sides heaving, but he hadn't tried to escape, hadn't attempted to charge or attack. Instead, he watched her with that same intelligence that had first caught her attention on the notice board. She approached him again, slowly, speaking in a low, steady voice that didn't carry to the audience but reached the horse. This time, when she placed her hands on his back, she didn't immediately mount. Instead, she leaned against him, her cheek pressed to his warm coat, her arms stretched as far as they could reach across his broad back. "I trust you," she whispered. "Do you trust me?" The minutes stretched on. Some in the crowd began to shift restlessly. Grant checked his watch, smirking. But Jackson watched with growing hope as Ghost gradually relaxed under Ellie's touch, his breathing steadying. With deliberate care, Ellie pulled herself onto his back once more. Ghost tensed, but didn't buck. Instead, he turned his head to look at her, as if making sure it was still Ellie and not someone else who had mounted him. "Start the clock," Jackson called to the timekeeper, his voice tight with tension. Ghost took a hesitant step forward, then another. Ellie sat lightly on his back, not using her knees to grip or attempting to direct him with pressure. Instead, she seemed to be allowing him to decide their path, her body moving in harmony with his. 1 minute passed. Ghost walked the perimeter of the corral, his stride growing more confident with each step. The crowd was silent now, witnessing something few had believed possible. 2 minutes. Ghost picked up his pace slightly, moving into a smooth trot. Ellie swayed with his motion, her posture relaxed but balanced. A smile began to form on her face, not triumph, but joy in the connection. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, the timekeeper announced. In the stands, Wesley Grant's expression had darkened. He leaned over to whisper something to one of his associates, who nodded and slipped away from the crowd. As the 3-minute mark approached, Ghost suddenly lifted his head, ears pricked forward in alarm. From behind the corral came the sharp crack of a starter pistol, the same sound used at the beginning of horse races. Ghost reared, his front hooves pawing at the air. The crowd surged to their feet, expecting to see Ellie thrown again, but she moved with him, leaning forward against his neck, her hands buried in his mane, speaking words only he could hear. The stallion came down hard, trembling, but Ellie remained mounted. 3 seconds later, the timekeeper's voice rang out, 3 minutes, challenge complete. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, beginning with Rose's high, clear voice, cheers erupted from the stands. People stamped their feet, whistled, applauded as Ellie slid from Ghost's back and stood beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder. Jackson pushed through the gate, his weathered face transformed by a genuine smile. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "By God. Girl, you actually did it." In the judge's stand, Mayor Wilson was consulting with the other officials, clearly uncomfortable with the outcome. Grant stormed over, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She got lucky. The horse was obviously drugged or—" "Enough, Wesley," Jackson interrupted. The challenge was clear. Ride Winchester's ghost for 3 minutes. She did, witnesses all around. He gestured to the crowd, many of whom were now pressing forward, eager to congratulate Ellie. "It's time to honor the agreement." Mayor Wilson cleared his throat. "There's still the matter of the paperwork, Harrison. Property transfers aren't quite so simple as—" "I've already filed the conditional deed with your office, Thomas," Jackson replied calmly. "All that's needed is your signature confirming the conditions have been met." He produced a document from his jacket pocket, which they have. Trapped by the public nature of the event and the enthusiastic response of the townspeople, Mayor Wilson reluctantly took the paper. "Very well, I'll process this immediately." As the official proceedings continued, Ellie's family made their way to her side. Her father's eyes shone with pride. Her mother wept quietly, and Rose bounced with excitement. Duke circled them all, tail wagging furiously, occasionally glancing up at Ghost as if to make sure the large newcomer understood his place in their pack. "Does this mean we get to live in a real house again?" Rose asked, her thin face alight. "With hope. It means we have a home," Ellie corrected gently, "and a lot of work ahead." The transformation of Willow Creek Ranch began the very next day. Jackson, having signed over the property, offered to stay on as an advisor, an arrangement Ellie gratefully accepted. His knowledge of the land, the animals, and the business of ranching would be invaluable as the Sullivans settled into their new life. The first weeks were a flurry of activity. The main house, neglected for too long, needed repairs to make it properly habitable. The Sullivans worked together, clearing debris, patching the roof, repainting walls that hadn't seen fresh color in a decade. Michael, despite his back injury, found he could manage small carpentry projects while seated, restoring cabinets and furniture with careful hands. Catherine, who had once worked as a school cafeteria cook, took over the kitchen, filling the house with the sense of home-cooked meals for the first time in years. Rose's health began to improve almost immediately. The clean air, nutritious food, and restored sense of purpose seemed to breathe new life into her frail body. Ghost remained a central figure in their new world. He accepted the Sullivan family with the same cautious trust he had extended to Ellie, though he still shied away from strangers. Jackson watched with amazement as the once untamable stallion allowed Rose to brush his coat, or stood patiently while Michael sketched his powerful form. "He was never meant to be broken," Ellie explained one evening as she and Jackson sat on the porch watching Ghost in the paddock. "Just understood." "Like most of us, I suppose," Jackson replied thoughtfully. Not all the challenges they faced were so easily resolved. Wesley Grant, humiliated by the outcome of the festival, began a subtle campaign against the Sullivans. Local suppliers mysteriously became reluctant to do business with Willow Creek. The bank questioned the terms of the existing loans. Rumors circulated in town about the homeless family playing at being ranchers. Ellie confronted these obstacles with the same quiet determination she had shown with Ghost. When feed suppliers hesitated, she found alternatives in neighboring counties. When equipment broke down and repair services were suddenly too busy, she learned to fix things herself, with Jackson's guidance. The turning point came unexpectedly through Rose. Having regained her strength, she had enrolled in the local school, where she encountered the inevitable cruelty of children who had heard their parents' gossip. Instead of retreating, she invited her classmates to visit the ranch for her birthday celebration. "Are you sure that's wise?" Catherine asked worriedly, "after how some of them have treated you?" "They just don't know us yet," Rose replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "Once they see what we're building here, they'll understand." The birthday party became an impromptu open house. Children arrived with suspicious parents who had come more out of curiosity than goodwill. They found not the chaotic squatters' camp they had imagined, but a working ranch coming back to life through dedicated effort. Ellie had prepared a simple demonstration with Ghost, not a performance of tricks or submission, but a display of partnership. Together they moved through a series of fluid patterns, horse and rider so attuned to each other that they seemed to communicate without visible signals. The spectacle left even the most skeptical observers impressed. One of those observers was Edward Pearson, the banker who had accompanied Grant to the ranch before the festival. After the demonstration, he approached Ellie privately. "Miss Sullivan," he began hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. I allowed Wesley Grant to influence my professional judgment regarding Willow Creek's potential." "Mr. Grant is very persuasive," Ellie acknowledged. "Yes, well," Pearson cleared his throat. "The bank is prepared to offer more favorable terms on the outstanding loans. And if you're interested in discussing capital improvements for the property, I believe we could arrange something suitable." Word spread through Meadowbrook. The Sullivan family wasn't just surviving at Willow Creek, they were reviving it. Local businesses, sensing the shift in community opinion, and perhaps regretting their earlier caution, began reaching out with offers of partnership. The feed store proposed a discount in exchange for boarding their delivery horses. The veterinarian suggested trading services for use of Willow Creek's pastures during drought periods. 6 months after the Harvest Festival, Mayor Wilson appeared at the ranch unannounced. He found Ellie in the barn, working with a neighbor's mare that had developed a fear of trailers. "Miss Sullivan," he greeted her, his official manner somewhat deflated by the hay sticking to his polished shoes. "I wanted to discuss a proposal with you." The town council, he explained, was interested in establishing an equine therapy program for veterans and at-risk youth. They had funding but needed a suitable facility, and more importantly, someone with Ellie's unique approach to working with troubled horses and people. "We would compensate you fairly, of course," he added quickly. "And it would bring additional revenue to Willow Creek." Ellie considered the proposal thoughtfully. "I'd want to develop the program myself, not just provide the space." Of course," Wilson agreed eagerly. "Your methods are precisely what we're interested in." That conversation became the foundation for Willow Creek's evolution from a struggling ranch to a thriving community resource. The equine therapy program was just the beginning. Soon Ellie was hosting workshops on natural horsemanship, while Michael, drawing on his bookkeeping background, offered financial literacy classes for small farmers. Catherine established a community kitchen that preserved and distributed surplus, produce from local gardens. Even Ghost found a new purpose. His sensitivity and intelligence, once seen as unmanageable wildness, made him an ideal partner for working with trauma survivors who recognized in him a kindred spirit, someone who had learned to trust again without surrendering his essential nature. A year after the challenge, Willow Creek hosted its own small festival, a celebration not just of the ranch's renewal, but of the community connections that had been strengthened through its transformation. Tables laden with food stretched across the front yard. Children played tag around the barn. Music and laughter filled the air that had once been heavy with defeat and resentment. Harrison Jackson, now a permanent resident in the ranch's refurbished guest cabin, surveyed the scene with quiet satisfaction. "Not bad for a girl who used to sell candies under the bridge," he commented, as Ellie joined him on the porch. "We've been fortunate," she acknowledged. "Fortunate, yes. But you've also worked harder than anyone I've ever known." Jackson nodded toward the paddock, where Ghost stood watching the festivities with alert interest. "You two are a lot alike, you know. Too stubborn to be broken, too smart to be fooled, and too strong to give up." Ellie smiled. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Jackson?" "The highest one I know how to give," he replied gruffly. As evening approached, Wesley Grant's black truck was spotted coming up the drive, an unexpected and somewhat unwelcome sight. The celebration quieted as he stepped out, looking uncomfortable, but determined. "Miss Sullivan," he greeted Ellie stiffly, "I won't intrude on your gathering. I just came to inform you that I'm selling Blue Pine Ranch. I've accepted an offer from a development group in Austin." "I'm sorry to hear that," Ellie replied, genuinely surprised. "Your family has owned that land for generations." Grant shrugged. a complex emotion crossing his face. Times change. The developers are interested in your water rights as well. They've authorized me to make you a very generous offer. Before Ellie could respond, Rose stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. Willow Creek isn't for sale, Mr. Grant, not at any price. Grant looked at the teenager, no longer frail, her cheeks healthy, her eyes bright with purpose, then at the gathering of community members who had fallen silent, watching the exchange. No, he said quietly. I don't suppose it is. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, you've done well here. Better than I expected. Better, perhaps, than I could have done. With that surprising admission, he nodded briefly and returned to his truck, driving away from Willow Creek and from Meadowbrook for the last time. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the property, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Ghost, who normally avoided crowds, allowed Ellie to lead him among the guests, accepting gentle touches from children and adults alike with remarkable patience. Standing at the edge of the gathering, watching her family move confidently through this new life they had built together, Ellie felt a profound sense of completion. The journey from beneath the bridge to Willow Creek Ranch had been improbable, challenging, at times seemingly impossible. Yet here they were, not just surviving but thriving, creating something meaningful not only for themselves but for the wider community. In the soft light of the lanterns, Ghost's white coat seemed to glow. He turned his intelligent eyes toward Ellie, and in that silent exchange was a shared understanding. Sometimes the most untamable spirit is the one that leads us home. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ellie and Ghost has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. This tale of trust, perseverance, and transformation reminds us that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most meaningful opportunities. If Ellie's journey resonated with you, we've prepared a special playlist of similarly uplifting stories about resilience and unexpected connections. You'll find it by clicking to the left. We pour our hearts into bringing these emotional stories to life every day, and your support means everything to us. Please subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video to help us continue sharing these powerful narratives. What moment in Ellie's journey moved you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until our next story,